Laudetur Jesus Christus, Vatican and World News.
In the headlines this Tuesday, May 20th, Caritas Gaza appeals for medical assistance for the population affected by the current bombardment. The Church marks Laudato Si Week, bringing an end to Laudato Si Year. And more than 1,000 migrants have been rescued off the Libyan coast during the past week. In the Vatican, I'm Francesca Merlo. Caritas Internationalis has launched an urgent appeal to bring medical assistance to the population affected by the current bombardment of Gaza. Lydia O'Kane reports.
There is still no end in sight to the fighting between Israel and Hamas, which has already claimed many lives, including those of children. Israel on Tuesday carried out a number of airstrikes on what it said were militant targets in Gaza. The bombardment toppled the Kahil building, which contains libraries and educational centres belonging to the Islamic University. Despite international efforts to halt the violence, Israel continues to hit densely populated civilian areas in response to rocket fire by Hamas. At least 212 Palestinians have been killed in heavy airstrikes so far, including 61 children and 36 women, with more than 1,400 people wounded. 10 people in Israel, including a 5-year-old boy and a soldier, have been killed. In light of the current escalation in hostilities, Caritas Internationalis launched an urgent appeal Monday to bring medical assistance to the population affected by the bombings. On the ground, Caritas Jerusalem is preparing to respond to the urgent needs of the thousands of wounded and the thousands of people forced to leave their homes. Describing the situation, Sister Bridget Tai, Secretary General of Caritas Jerusalem, said the shelling is extremely intense. The people of Gaza have experienced many wars over many years, but everyone agrees that this time is completely different. They are trapped in this densely populated strip of land at the mercy of violent aerial bombardment and with nowhere to find refuge. More than 2 million people live in the Gaza Strip, an area of about 365 square kilometres, and from which it is impossible to escape because of the Israeli blockade. People are trying to save themselves by seeking refuge in schools. 17,000 have already found shelter, Sister Tai said. The continuous bombings do not yet allow Caritas Jerusalem to intervene, but once a ceasefire takes effect, we will provide outpatient trauma care and essential primary health care in our clinic, Sister Tai explained. The same goes for the clinic's mobile units and medical teams. Caritas needs adequate resources to provide medical care, food and other basic necessities to the affected populations in the different areas of the Strip. The new escalation of hostilities brings with it the risk of a humanitarian crisis. Around 40,000 Palestinians have been displaced and 2,050 people have lost their homes due to the bombings.
The Laudato Si Week 2021 is currently being held from May 16th to May 25th as a culmination of the special Laudato Si Year anniversary, proposed by Pope Francis from May 2020 to May 2021 to mark 5 years since the publication of his encyclical Laudato Si in 2015. The Laudato Si Week aims to celebrate the great progress the entire Church has made on its journey towards ecological conversion. It is also a time to reflect on what the COVID-19 pandemic has taught us in order to prepare for a future of hope for all. One of the events of the Laudato Si Week was a Vatican-sponsored webinar held on Monday focusing on the key political opportunities the two crucial international conferences offer this year, namely the 15th Conference on the Convention of Biological Diversity, or COP15 in Kunming in China in October, and the 26th UN Climate Change Conference, or COP26, in November in Glasgow, Scotland. Among the panellists of Monday's webinar was a young climate activist from South Africa who has attended COP22 through to COP25. She expressed her concern regarding climate change and social justice.
The science has been clear. We need to change our relationship with the planet. We have less than 9 years to save the world from irreversible damage. As a young person who is the custodian of the present and the future, I can't help but ask, are we doing enough to save the planet? As a young person, I believe that climate justice is social justice. Climate justice is intersectional. I'm thinking about the lived reality of people in vulnerable communities, people in South Africa. Social issues such as unemployment, inequality, access to electricity, crime, gender-based violence, and so many more still plague our society. As young people, we are inheriting a world that it is nothing like what we pictured when we were 10. And that is why I have been part of and supported the global youth-led call for climate justice. We need world leaders to place urgent action on the climate crisis with understanding that it poses an existential threat to humanity. The global pandemic has opened our eyes to social injustice and the adverse effects of climate change on vulnerable communities. It has presented the perfect opportunity to change the system in place to allow us to adequately address the climate crisis in a way that ensures no country is left behind and everyone finds their way in the discourse. Young people have, considering these times, continued to advocate for climate justice, creating awareness on the crisis on social media, as well as calling for global action. But I can't help but ask if, as the leaders in our society, can we honestly say that we have done enough to address issues of sustainable development in our communities, in our countries, and globally?
That was Ditebogo Lebea, a young panelist at Monday's webinar who has attended COP22 through to COP25, speaking on climate change and social justice. As the Church continues to celebrate Laudato Si Week, churches in Indonesia are sounding the ecological alarm at the world's largest volcanic lake. Christian leaders around Lake Toba are warning that deforestation in the area could lead to an environmental disaster. Devon Watkins has the story.
Lake Toba is Indonesia's largest freshwater lake and is nestled in the island of Sumatra. Not only is it the largest lake in Indonesia, Lake Toba is the largest volcanic lake in the world, measuring 100 kilometers in length and 30 in width. Despite its pristine beauty, deforestation in the area surrounding it has led to an uptick in flooding, putting residents' lives at risk from mudslides. In response, a Catholic priest and a local Christian church are sounding the ecological alarm. Father Hilarius Kemet said that Indonesia's government bears some responsibility for allowing illegal logging around the volcanic lake. Local people are often blamed because forests have given way to fields, he said, but the government must shoulder some of the responsibility for having failed to introduce regulations to protect the environment and forests. Father Kemet acts as the director of the Capuchin Office for Justice, Peace, and the Integrity of Creation in Sumatra. He said that a major disaster will happen if Indonesians don't urge local and national governments to act decisively to stop deforestation. He also urged all Indonesians to draw inspiration from Pope Francis's encyclical Laudato Si, saying the Pope's message on the care of our common home is for everyone, not only Catholics. Other Christians are also echoing Father Kemet's warning. The Indonesian Batak Protestant Church released a statement on May 16th urging everyone to put a halt to the environmental destruction going on around Lake Toba. The government should toughen laws on illegal logging and prevent further clearance, said Reverend Robinson Butar, the chairman of the church. Lake Toba has become a major tourist attraction in recent years. It was formed by a supervolcanic eruption some 74,000 years ago, an event which geologists say is the largest known eruption on Earth in the last 25 million years. Scientists say deforestation leads to increases in erosion and flooding since there are fewer tree root systems to hold the soil together and minimize soil movement and mudslides. I'm Devon Watkins.
The Dicastery for Laity, Family and Life has presented guidelines for World Youth Day celebrations, in particular churches as a resource to be creative in planning and implementing initiatives which show that the Church considers its mission with young people to be a pastoral priority. Father Benedict Mayaki reports.
The Dicastery for Laity, Family and Life on Tuesday held a press conference to present some pastoral guidelines for the celebration of World Youth Day in the particular churches. The guidelines, according to the Dicastery, are intended to be a resource that presents the ideal motivations and possible practical implementations that allow a diocesan World Youth Day to be an opportunity to bring out the potential for good that is in each young person. The international celebrations of World Youth Day are held every 3 years in a different country with the participation of the Holy Father. The ordinary celebration of the event, on the other hand, takes place annually in the particular churches that undertake the organization of the observance. Every year ahead of the celebrations, the Pope publishes a message intended to accompany the journey of the Universal Church with young people. The The guidelines presented today highlighted that celebrating World Youth Day in particular churches has great significance for young people and the local ecclesial community because some cannot participate at the international level due to studies, work, or financial difficulties. For this reason, celebrating locally serves to raise awareness among the ecclesial community as a whole of their mission to transmit the faith to the younger generations. The guidelines, therefore, are to be considered as a favorable opportunity to be creative in planning and implementing initiatives that show that the Church considers its mission with young people to be a pastoral priority. The guidelines further noted that on the 22nd of November 2020, the Solemnity of Christ the King, Pope Francis called for a relaunch of the celebration of World Youth Day in the particular churches, announcing that the celebration, traditionally held on Palm Sunday, will now be held on the Sunday of the Solemnity of Christ the King, starting from 2021. It then explored 6 cornerstones that are to be at the heart of the World Youth Day celebrations. It said that for young people, the celebration of World Youth Day should be a festival of faith, an experience of church, a missionary experience, a vocational discernment and a call to holiness, an experience of pilgrimage and universal fraternity. The pastoral guidelines encourage dioceses to ensure that young people who are less present and less active in established pastoral structures do not feel excluded, so that they are expected and welcome, each in their own individual uniqueness and human and spiritual potential. I'm Father Benedict Mayaki.
In world news, the number of people from Myanmar seeking shelter in India has swelled to more than 15,000, with more likely to cross over as fighting intensifies in parts of Myanmar following a coup. The influx into the small northeastern Indian state of Mizoram, which shares a porous mountainous border with Myanmar, began in late February as policemen fled to avoid having to take orders from a junta trying to suppress opposition to the February 1st coup. And finally, more than 1,000 migrants have been rescued off the Libyan coast during the past week alone. Nathan Morley reports.
The International Organization for Migration, or IOM, says that between May the 9th and 15th, 1,074 migrants were rescued or intercepted at sea and then returned to Libya. Meanwhile, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees said that the Libyan Coast Guard had rescued nearly 350 illegal migrants off Libya's western coast on Monday alone. According to the IOM, a total of 8,170 illegal migrants, including many women and children, were rescued off the coast so far this year. The IOM also revealed that so far in 2021, 168 illegal migrants had died and 389 others were missing off the Libyan coast on the so-called Central Mediterranean migration routes. Libya has been suffering insecurity and chaos since the fall of the late leader Muammar Gaddafi back in 2011. That made the North African nation a preferred point of departure for illegal migrants who were wanting to cross the Mediterranean Sea towards European shores. Rescued migrants end up inside overcrowded reception centres across Libya, despite repeated international calls to close those centres. In a separate development, Spain deployed its military to the Moroccan border on Tuesday as thousands of migrants jumped fences or swam onto European soil for the second day in a row after Rabat loosened border controls amid a deepening diplomatic spat with Spain. For Vatican Radio, this is Nathan Morley reporting.
And that brings us to the end of this edition of Vatican and World News. For more on these and other stories, we invite you to visit our web portal at www.vaticannews.va. And you can also follow us on Facebook and on Twitter. My thanks go to Gustavo Messina in studio. In the Vatican, I'm Francesca Merlo.